The history of the world. The history of the world is motivated. And the history of the world is motivated with the history of the presidency. A powerful condition. Welcome to an bold episode. Today we'll be talking about the history of the presidency. A very bold thing to anticipate its first ideas. But when we anticipate it, we will talk about lots of things that ancient, especially in destination. First, we will be voting. But then by the time the Sixth and the war was over, Congress had been too powerful. The United States was looking for a president, and many of them moved to be George Washington. And they succeeded. And George Washington was president for 8 years. What George Washington did was a lot of things. And for George Washington presidency. George Washington had a very, very commissional presidency. Washington made the states of money. By the first two presidencies, he accomplished a lot of emancipation throughout the world. The China and recognized many things in China. He had a very, very, very important issue to fight on. Washington had a lot of issues to deal with his presidency. Washington had a lot. The history of the world is motivated with a powerful history of the presidency. And what Washington did, it was a very, very great thing. What he did was a very important thing. His cabinet members were like, normally, a system that was divided into single parts. And their single parts that they got was a very, very interesting parts. But one day, back to Mike, he'll tell you how the single parts were run by and forward to his vice president, Secretary of State. The Secretary of State, Thomas Jefferson, motivated many things. Republican things. He really was a man of the people, and he was a radical. Thomas Jefferson intonated things. His Secretary of State, people, so he had a people idea. The inordination cabinet member also had a split design. So he didn't have an inordinated, but they were splitted. The time he inordinated, what he did was a very, very, very excellent idea. What he took and traveled was a very, not his opposing ideas. Washington definitely had the courage. The important of things, because Washington had a lot of things done with his presidency. Washington had a look to the Constitution as well. Also, the system of government was still run really by Congress, but he did beat Congress some. How he did was a very successful thing. One of the things was how he emancipated a lot of things. His first ideas were very, very, very important. By the time he entered office, the time George Washington had a lot of region, he incorporated a lot of things in government. The constitutional things that he vetoed were definitely some by Congress, but some by the important. He also ate the pond. Many people respected him, as well as his vice president. He also imported a lot of things. He did not be called my excellency, or my excellency, or my high majesty, excellency. Really something that was faint. He wanted to really just Mr. President. He didn't want to be like a king. And he succeeded very goodly. What he did was a very, very, very coordinated idea. His ideas that emancipated him throughout his presidency really important. The Constitution that he set it up is a very important Constitution. He had to become a man. He also was the first of tons of things that we don't know today, but that is on the side of our existence. We talk about him as a very, very, very important man, but it doesn't know how he get into motion with him. You know how he did it. It's a very coordinated, it's a very good idea. His ideas emancipate the people to follow. And what he did was a main tool that the people had. The President of the United States really is set by Washington and will be set by Washington for the next century. But as time to come. Washington to emancipated a lot of things. And he made a lot of ideas. What his ideas were was how were very, very. It's about the president. It's of how it is. We will be talking about it, the generation. But how it could become a nation that is a more stable nation was with Washington every time. Washington's ideas emanated in 1791. Beyond 1792, many people thought Washington wasn't thinking of re-election, but Jefferson people wanted it is time for re-election. We need a stable, or this will not be. And he became president for a second term. He probably was disastrous by then. Disaster to a way. He had a plan on a president's mansion. Everyone knows it. The president's mansion that he planned out is a very, very intimate mansion. The mansion was in there. That is all I have to say. Back to Mike. And the property of his mansion was a very, very distinct mansion. Washington decided to do the president's mansion and build Washington to make the world more secretive. And very, very secretive. The secretive that he does was a very, very important secretive idea. Washington is a very, very unique president. He was in tons of things. But one thing that he wasn't into was how he administrated it. Seriously, Washington did a lot of things. He was shy, he was emancipated, but oh no. Washington had to admit his constitutional things sector wasn't that successful. By the time Washington reached his mid-60s, he was very and about it. So he needs to coordinate a very, very successful presidency. He knew that it's time to be successful. He knew that. But he couldn't really do that. Washington emancipated a lot of things. Throughout the presidency of Washington, and he also stepped once on the floor, and he didn't get what he wanted. He ended up having to veto it, but it was 53. The time the end of Washington's presidency rolled around, he was a very incorrect. It's time for commercial. As you know, Washington's presidency is not that much known. It is the third best presidency. Washington is known, but people still nowadays his successors mostly known. We'll see you tomorrow. That's one. We'll see you later after the commercial. Welcome back. This is the Presidency of the United States. We are at John Adams. His presidency was not successful as the presidency of George Washington, but that is all I have to say about Adams, because he was a very, very interesting character. And we have it. We'll go back to Mike. So, Mike. Okay? I'm ruining it. So, it's okay. In the presidency of Washington, he had a very, very many people thanks, but Adams' presidency was a very, very important. Adams had a lot of things to do with the monarchy, with the world. The world had a bank, so Adams had become president, and that was all he had to know. Adams' presidency is a very interesting one. He had a personality like a Bengal. He was funnier. He also put on sort of like a tough guy who breaks his head open almost. Sometimes he acts like it never happened. He also to the Rick coast in the Boston Massacre. He also protected protected the breakthroughs in the Boston Massacre. Did you know that? Why was he second president anyway? But he wasn't found involved with Patriot. He had a very image. Adams is an image, is immortally painted, but dealing with how American sailors being depressed and putting the French. Well, it's French because they invented it. So he had his free station, but XYZ affair, that was just so emancipated. And French was angry. They kept doing it. They knew it was a failure of peace aviation. Adams had a second peace calculation to emancipate the first. But away for way. What happened to him was a very bad image. And many people were thinking the ideas that Adams is pulling off is not a very good. So he signs the Anti-Addiction Act. That means that no one can say any about federal office seekers or federal officers who were sentenced. And that really, including presidents, and that really defines it. In 1800, Thomas Jefferson ran for second term. By the time November rolled, he was in his new mansion, Aberdeen, Adams. But in the election, enough votes had image for Thomas Jefferson to be the third president. He had lost. Emancipation. Thomas Jefferson's presidency, it was a very great presidency. Thomas Jefferson was a president who emancipated the people. What he did was a very fancy. He was sensitive. He had lots of things sensitivity, but how much sensitivity was how much. He also did a scandal by the second. In one and a half years into his administration, a scandal. He had an affair with Sally Hemings, one of his slaves. That was a very suspicious. What he did was importantly to invent the scandal out of town. What he really did was how he emancipated a lot of things. What Jefferson, he just ignored it. Many people could pitch another scandal in the modern day, but they didn't see that it could be a lie in the Constitution. They thought it was too early to do it. They didn't think it was too early to do it in the Clinton affair, but no one impeached him. The time he fainted, he also lowered the federal government. What he does was a very emancipation. Jefferson really had to do it. The scandal before him, the emancipation, he smaller government. Adams and Washington began to make it gigantic. You don't even see how gigantic it is. See? Where is this hammer? Whoa. But he made it spelling. Oh, okay. It's almost touch. Clap. That was very amazing. But one thing that always Jefferson is small. He also uses his power and his people that controls it. They control the Secretary of State. Now I think Congress was controlled by someone, but admittedly we don't know. But in thanks, back to Mike. Thomas Jefferson's administration was a very inimitable administration. Thomas Jefferson needs his strength to do not strengthen government and lower it. It was a very great administration for the people and for the violence. Now back to me. Thomas Jefferson is a very interesting president. Third founding father. What he did as president was lower government. And he succeeded. Eventually paving the way for other things going on. But the greatest thing Jefferson ever did as president was Louisiana Purchase. Importantly, he did wrote the Declaration of Independence. And no, I'm seriously, the Louisiana Purchase was a very It was the Lewis and Clark expedition. It was like tons of things. He bought land from Napoleon, and that was a great deal because you know how a giant boat is, like a giant boat. Honestly, more than that. It should cost. Could cost less than that. The giant boat. He ain't gonna do it. So he sent Lewis and Clark, but he didn't know. And he thinks it's not, but he just does it. Isn't that a betrayal of the Constitution? Well, it wasn't. Jefferson totally intended the idea of presidency. Jefferson is very interesting for foreign use, but aimed to incentives. Jefferson did not always have a very, very great mood into it. As you know, he admits that his enemies also screamed how this was very, very unconstitutional. Into the Constitution, many people looked for the Constitution advice. Another thing at the time was how French was still violent, and the English starts depressing American chicken. That was tons of things going on. Later that year, he won re-election, but a hard one. One of the first things was his first 2 years of his second term. In his first 2 years of his second term, he emancipated how, saying that we will not anybody, how England was depressing. Its France was captured in the Saute leagues. By the time he entered office, he just hated his presidency. He even wrote it on his tombstone. This was a president who definitely had things. Now it's time for commercial. We'll be talking about things. Also, Mike needs to say something about it. You know, so Mike is also one question. Well, I'm wondering question. My question I'm wondering is why the scandal that she put it off to do it. It was a very so complicated scandal. Why did you say that? But why didn't I? Now we're going. We have to go. We'll see you later after the commercial. Welcome back. And now it's time for joining us. We'll be talking about the presidency of James Madison. James Madison? Who's James Madison? You know who James Madison is, Secretary of State Thomas Jefferson. His presidency was a very, very 8 years, just like Thomas Jefferson was. The first 8-year president since 4 years. He was in there. What he is most famous for is James Madison. He also emancipated a lot of things to it more. He was exempt. He's much more interesting with Dolly Madison. Because Dolly Madison was like a woman who had paid off to him. He was like emancipated. Dolly Madison was importantly interesting for his wit here hard. He did host. She let the one work to Dolly, but importantly, in 1811, the important faces. He also governed land conquered by William Henry Harrison. Great, not like a wig. Get it? Not like a wig. Let's see about this. But let's go to Mike now. But the incarnation that Madison completely defined was how his aides. By 1812, he was mad at how Bishop declared war on Britain to get Canada, the USA. That was a very, very potent before Alaska came in. But that was a very, very consequential moment of his presidency. Madison asked Congress for a declaration of war. Then Congress accepted it, and they went to war. How they did it was not that much of a question, because Madison admits by later 1812, he won re-election. Surprisingly, in 1813, more battles invaded. Madison tried to emancipate how long the thing would be going, but that doesn't mean the incarnation was successful, and I think it was not successful. As you know, Madison incarnated many things. He was a very a second cousin. He was the second cousin of Zachary Taylor. That is amazing. One of the things he opposed was how beloved Madison. Also how it was spent. Madison is a man who definitely defined his presidency. By 1813's administration, in 1814 more things were going on. In late 1814, the British were in Washington and burned the president's mantle too. But Dolly made heroic things like a first lady. She saved the portrait of George Washington. This was amazing for the world, and no one knew it. But it was amazing. She even invited Lewis and Hart to one of her hostess dinners. Isn't that amazing? Importantly, his last 2 years as president. See, Madison implemented many things to embed Spain, how he created an office space. Madison is a man who definitely had the full. For the next 40 presidents, they would have to emancipate Madison's legacy. And then it's commercial time. So, heroically, good job. Welcome back to Mike. Okay, to Mike. Okay, let's do right. The presidency of the United States, led by Madison, is actually continued by was the Democratic Republicans. The last founding father. The last dynasty of Virginia, really the last of their motivation ideas, was James Monroe. James Monroe's presidency was very, very cool. But Madison's presidency was very down. One of the first things was his slavery defeat. As you know, one thing that it was a great thing so that was the really beginning of a peace that only lasted a few years. A very, very thing. What it was a special thing to admit. What he also set his opposites. So, Missouri, 3 states. And Missouri, slave state, something free state. Missouri, 3 states. Well, I don't know which one was. I'm pretty sure. I don't know. Missouri was the slave state. I don't know. We don't know this. But apparently, there was a fly of that. Well, slavery was wrong. Lincoln would probably end it. Lincoln didn't end it, just to say. But he did have the emancipation to end forever. Okay. Monroe's successful presidency begins how it fated. Was how Andrew Jackson conquered it without land. Monroe sent Jackson for a reason. He got the land that Jackson had the British and because the Spanish didn't really do the defense how British were. That was a very, very good mission. He conquered it without land. He conquered Florida. How Monroe governed Florida was very successfully. It was successfully to a way. Monroe was re-elected, and he implemented things to a new idea. Probably they thought, oh, how these other countries are moving in. They said, this is our bathtub. And that's over. We need to say in our land. So he declared the Monroe Doctrine. It was really wrote by John Quincy Adams, Secretary of State. How does Mike say about it for Mike's last stand in this episode? Well, I'm thinking that was an idea, but it's really more patient, okay? Yeah. And it's a very good idea. He set the base for half of real ours and half of theirs. Probably most of the really landed rule was probably the other side. But he faked this. Monroe, he changed things. Monroe had the Monroe Doctrine named. But one was how he sent slaves back to Africa, founding Monroe. Another thing. Monroe's presidency he was the last of the founding fathers. Well, this is the history of the founding fathers. I hope you enjoyed. Next episode, we'll see how John Quincy Adams and Tyler goes, how they issued it. not being a founding father. Goodbye. The presidency is rightly waiting.